The nightclub pulsed like a living organism, its walls trembling under the relentless assault of electronic music. Bass notes slammed into the chest with physical force, vibrating through bones and teeth, while strobe lights fractured the air into blinding shards of white and neon. Glasses clinked endlessly at the bar in a constant, careless rhythm of celebration as bodies pressed together in sweaty proximity. Voices overlapped in drunken harmony, laughter slurring into shouts, until one phrase rose above the chaos, again and again, shouted by strangers who barely knew the man they celebrated. "Happy birthday, Leo." The night smelled of expensive liquor, perfume, and excess.
Thanks, everyone. Sterling Corp is going to have a great year with me in charge of the Asian division.
Leo stood at the center of it all, cheeks flushed, tie loosened, eyes glassy with alcohol and self-importance. He lifted his glass high, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim, as if the entire room existed solely to reflect his success back at him. Every cheer fed his ego, every approving glance reinforcing the illusion that he was untouchable. To him, the future was already conquered, reduced to a headline with his name printed in bold letters. "Leo, do not drink too much. You have the board meeting tomorrow morning. I prepared your notes, but you need to read them." Clara leaned in close to be heard, her voice barely surviving beneath the music. One hand hovered near his arm, not quite touching, as if unsure of her right to comfort him anymore. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the crowd, calculating consequences even here and even now. In her mind, tomorrow morning loomed large and unforgiving, a conference room full of sharp suits and sharper questions. She had carried that weight alone, quietly, while he celebrated.
God, Clara, you are such a buzzkill. It is my birthday. Relax. Jessica here knows how to have fun, right, babe?
Leo shrugged her off with a careless motion, the kind reserved for inconveniences rather than people. He laughed and reached instead for Jessica, pulling her close with possessive ease. She smiled vacantly, eyes shining under the lights, her presence ornamental and uncomplicated. The contrast between the two women was stark, with Clara stiff with concern and history, and Jessica draped against him like an accessory chosen for the night. "Leo, who is she?" The question escaped Clara before she could stop it. Her breath caught as she looked at Jessica, then back at Leo, searching his face for a joke or a misunderstanding. Her stomach tightened as a slow, sinking realization began to form, heavy and nauseating, while the music seemed to grow even louder around her.
Look, Clara, you are great. You are a great secretary. But I am a Sterling. I need a woman who fits the image. Jessica is on the cover of Vogue. You wear cardigans. We are done.
Leo exhaled dramatically, rolling his eyes as though burdened by the need to explain something painfully obvious. Each word landed with deliberate cruelty, stripping years of shared work and intimacy down to job titles and clothing choices. The name Sterling hung between them like a shield and a weapon, an excuse polished by privilege. Around them, the party roared on, oblivious and indifferent, as Clara's world quietly fractured. "Done. I wrote your entire proposal. I saved your department from bankruptcy. I loved you." Her voice shook, despite her effort to stay composed. The words spilled out, fueled by desperation and disbelief, each sentence a confession she had never planned to make in a nightclub. Memories flashed behind her eyes of late nights, endless revisions, and sacrifices made invisible. Love, she realized too late, had been the most unprofitable investment of all.
Yeah. Here is a severance check. Take an Uber home. Security, escort her out. She is ruining the vibe.
Leo laughed it off, already turning away as if the conversation had bored him. He produced the check with casual efficiency, the final transaction in a relationship he now framed as employment. At his signal, large hands closed around Clara's arms as security dragged her backward through the lights and noise. The crowd noticed then, not with concern, but curiosity, amusement flickering across drunken faces. They pushed her through the back door, and the music cut off abruptly, replaced by the roar of rain. Water soaked her clothes instantly as the door slammed shut behind her. Laughter from inside leaked faintly through the walls, distorted and cruel. Alone in the alley, rain streamed down her face, indistinguishable from tears, as the night swallowed her whole. Heavy rain flooded the narrow alleyway as a relentless downpour lashed brick walls and overflowing dumpsters. Water streamed down fire escapes like liquid metal, pooling at Claire's feet and soaking the hems of her clothes. Beyond the mouth of the alley, a nightclub continued to pulse with life, its bass reduced to a distant, suffocated throb, as though the city itself were holding its breath. Neon glow bled weakly into the rain, smearing the darkness with exhausted color. Clara sat hunched on an overturned trash can with her shoulders caved inward and her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she could keep the world from touching her. Tears ran freely down her face, indistinguishable from the rain, and her breath hitched in uneven gasps that spoke of humiliation and loss. Every sound felt amplified inside her chest, from the rain to the distant music and the echo of Leo's words replaying again and again like a wound that refused to close. Without warning, a sleek Rolls Royce Phantom glided into the alley with predatory silence, its polished body cutting through the rain as if it belonged to another reality. The engine made no announcement and simply arrived. Darkened windows reflected Clara's broken posture back at her, and then one window descended smoothly to reveal only shadow within. The contrast between the decaying alley and the immaculate car felt almost unreal.
Get in.
The voice came from the darkness, deep and stripped of warmth, carrying an authority that did not need to raise itself. It was not a request or a command born of anger, but inevitability spoken aloud. The rain seemed to soften around that single word, as though even the storm were listening. "Mr. Sterling? I can't." Leo fired me. Her head snapped up in shock as she peered into the shadowed interior. Saying his name made everything suddenly real and terrifying. Her words tumbled out thick with disbelief and shame, as if speaking them aloud might finally make them make sense. Fired, discarded, replaced, each thought struck her like another drop of icy rain.
Leo does not have the authority to fire the janitor, let alone my best analyst. Get in the car.
There was no impatience in his tone, only certainty sharpened to a blade. The rain continued its assault as the door unlocked itself with a soft mechanical whisper. Clara hesitated only a fraction of a second before obeying, drawn by a force she could neither name nor resist. As she climbed inside, the world outside vanished. The door closed automatically and sealed her into an interior so quiet it felt sacred. The leather seats held the faint scent of age and wealth, and the silence pressed against her ears until she became acutely aware of her own trembling. Cold seeped through her soaked clothes and set her teeth on edge.
Drink, it's 50 years old. Do not spill it.
Magnus extended a crystal glass toward her with a steady hand. The amber liquid caught the dim interior light and glowed softly like something precious. The glass felt heavy in Clara's fingers, as though it carried the weight of decades and expectations. Her hands shook despite her efforts, with cold and emotion conspiring against her. "Sir, Leo broke up with me. He's with Jessica now." The confession slipped out in a fragile rush, her voice barely audible, saying it hurt more than she expected and reopened a raw wound. She stared down at the scotch and could not meet his gaze, feeling small and foolish for letting something so personal bleed into the moment.
Jessica, the swimsuit model. Leo is an idiot. He trades a diamond for a piece of glass because the glass is shiny.
Magnus barely glanced up from his tablet as he spoke, his dismissal clinical and absolute. Data scrolled across the screen and reflected faintly in his eyes, which held no trace of sympathy, only judgment. When he finally turned to her, the intensity of his gaze felt almost physical and demanded recognition.
I read the report on the Asian expansion. Leo didn't write it. You did.
The words landed with surgical precision. In that instant, Clara felt exposed, as if every late night and quiet sacrifice had been illuminated. Her breath caught as the truth hovered between them. Undeniable. Yes, the single word carried exhaustion, pride, and fear all at once. She waited and braced herself, unsure whether the revelation would save her or finish her.
It was brilliant, aggressive, flawless. I do not like waste, Clara, and letting you go would be a waste. Leo thinks he is the king of the city. He forgets that I am the one who built the throne.
His voice remained calm, but beneath it lay something vast and immovable. The rain continued to drum against the car's roof, distant and irrelevant. In the silence that followed, Clara felt the balance of her world shift as the worst night of her life quietly became something else entirely. The car glided through the city streets with deceptive calm, its engine humming like a restrained beast. Streetlights slid across the windshield in slow, golden streaks, illuminating Clara's reflection just enough for her to see the tension tightening her jaw. Leather seats cradled her body, luxurious yet suffocating, as if the vehicle itself was complicit in whatever destination awaited. Outside, the city kept breathing, unaware that inside this moving capsule, alliances were about to be forged and destinies quietly rewritten. "Where are you taking me?" Magnus did not look at her immediately. His hands remained steady on the wheel, fingers relaxed, utterly in control. The road ahead curved toward darkness, away from familiar neighborhoods, away from anything Clara could still call her own. The silence stretched just long enough to remind her how little power she currently held, how completely her life had been uprooted by choices already made.
My estate, you have nowhere to go. You gave up your apartment to move in with Leo, didn't you?
The words landed with surgical precision. Clara felt the truth of them settle in her chest like a weight she could no longer shift. The past months flashed through her mind, packed boxes, keys left behind, the naive certainty that love would be enough. The city outside blurred as she confronted the stark reality Magnus so effortlessly named. "Yes, I'm homeless." Magnus finally turned his head, just slightly, enough for the corner of his mouth to lift. It was not kindness that softened his expression, but calculation. The car continued its smooth descent toward a world Clara had only seen from a distance. A world built on ownership, dominance, and unspoken rules she was only beginning to understand.
Not anymore. I have a proposition. Leo needs to be taught a lesson. He thinks he can inherit my empire. He is weak. I need someone to help me dismantle him. Someone who knows his secrets. Someone who knows his weaknesses.
Each sentence unfolded like a blade, sharp and deliberate. The city lights thinned as the road widened. Estates replacing apartment blocks, iron gates looming like silent sentinels. Clara's heartbeat quickened, not just with fear, but with a dangerous spark of relevance. Magnus wasn't speaking hypothetically. He was recruiting her, elevating her pain into a weapon. "You want me to help you destroy your own son?" The question hung between them, heavy with disbelief. Clara searched his face for hesitation, for regret, for some trace of paternal conflict. What she found instead was stillness, a man who had already made peace with cruelty long before this conversation began.
I want to test him. If he breaks, he breaks. But I need a partner. A queen, not a secretary, not a shadow. I want you to marry me.
The word lingered in the air, transforming the interior of the car into something charged and unreal. Marriage was not an offer of love here, but of power, an invitation into a throne room built on ambition and vengeance. Clara's breath caught as the implications unfolded, one after another, impossible yet terrifyingly clear. "Excuse me? You are his father." Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. The sudden intake of breath, the sharp movement, the burn in her throat as she struggled to process the audacity of what she had just heard. The world outside might as well have ceased to exist. There was only the man beside her and the future he was daring her to step into.
I am 56 years old. I am a widower. I am the richest man in the state. I do not need a nurse. I need an equal. You have the brain. I have the power. Together we will rule this city. And Leo, imagine his face when he has to call you mother.
As Magnus leaned closer, his presence filled the space, his cologne rich and commanding, his confidence unshakable. Clara felt it seep into her senses, not as seduction, but as inevitability. Images surfaced unbidden: Leo's arrogance, his betrayal, the way he had underestimated her. For the first time since losing everything, she felt the scales begin to tip. Thor and Sar nauesterday antarterdein segendaost. Sar de gedertin dakar kommoensai. Beshoot soap kubauend fringiers inekasribio insurat and daosharkians. The silence that followed was no longer empty. It was thick with understanding, with shared darkness. Clara's small laugh escaped her before she could stop it, sharp-edged and honest. In that sound lived every humiliation she had swallowed, every compromise she had endured, and the intoxicating promise of revenge dressed as empowerment.
Is that a yes?
The car slowed as towering gates came into view, wrought iron curling like a crown against the night sky. Clara straightened, feeling something inside her settle into place. This was no longer about survival. This was about ascent. It's a deal. The world announced itself in fragments before it ever settled into a single room. The sharp, impatient swipe of a credit card echoed like a judge's gavel, final and unquestionable. Measuring tapes whispered around waists and shoulders as fabric pulled taut, released, then tightened again with clinical precision. High heels struck marble floors in crisp staccato, each step a declaration of intent. Money moved invisibly through the air, converting desire into certainty and transforming choices into commands. This was not shopping. It was preparation for conquest, a ritual montage of wealth asserting its dominance over time, craft, and people. Magnus's bedroom emerged as the quiet eye of that storm. The space was vast, curated, and immaculately controlled. Every surface polished to reflect power without warmth. Soft lighting pooled against dark wood and steel, framing Magnus as he stood before a mirror and fastened the buttons of his cuffs with practiced ease. Each movement was economical, rehearsed through years of boardrooms and closed-door negotiations. The bed behind him was untouched, and the air was faintly scented with leather and something sharper, like ambition itself. This room was not for rest. It was a command center.
No, not that dress, the gold one. Leo likes glitter. We will give him the sun.
His voice cut through the room with calm authority, as if alternatives had never truly existed. The dismissed dress became irrelevant the moment he spoke, erased by tone alone. In his mind, gold was not a color, but a strategy, reflective and blinding, impossible to ignore. He was already imagining how light would fracture across the fabric and how eyes would follow Clara before she even realized she was being watched. This was not about taste. It was about spectacle engineered to satisfy an audience Magnus had already measured and dismissed. It is very expensive, Magnus. The hesitation in her voice lingered longer than the words themselves. Clara stood surrounded by luxury that felt too sharp and too loud, as if it might bruise her if she moved the wrong way. Price tags, even unseen, weighed on her conscience as symbols of thresholds she'd never intended to cross. She was aware of the numbers, the implications, and the invisible ledger being written around her. Expense, to her, still meant consequence. The room did not answer her concern. It simply waited for Magnus to overwrite it.
You are a Sterling now. The price tag does not matter. The impact matters.
Magnus moved behind her, his presence registering before his touch ever landed. When his hands settled on her shoulders, they did not ask permission. They claimed territory. The weight of them was deliberate and anchoring, possessive in a way that made resistance feel theoretical. His words followed the pressure, reshaping her identity in real time. Sterling was not a name, but a recalibration, stripping away old scales of value. Impact, in his world, was the only currency that survived. With unhurried precision, he brushed her hair aside and exposed the vulnerable line of her neck to the cool air. The gesture was intimate, but impersonal, like a jeweler preparing a display. His fingers briefly grazed her skin, sending a small, involuntary shiver through her, before withdrawing just enough to heighten awareness. This was choreography, every motion designed to remind her how easily he could rearrange her, position her, and adorn her as he saw fit.
One more thing.
He lifted the necklace with reverence that bordered on theatrical. The emeralds were massive, their green depth swallowing the light rather than reflecting it, ancient and watchful. As he lowered it around her neck, the clasp clicked shut with finality, a sound too loud in the quiet room. The stones settled against her collarbone and instantly asserted their presence, dragging her posture downward even as they demanded attention. History clung to them, dense and unyielding.
This belonged to my late wife. The press knows this necklace. When you wear this, everyone will know you belong to the top of the food chain.
The words wrapped around the necklace, like an additional chain. Late wife, press, and top of the food chain, each layered meaning onto the emeralds, transforming them from jewelry into a public statement. This was legacy repurposed, grief converted into leverage. Magnus did not look for permission in her reflection. He looked for alignment. In his world, belonging was not about affection, but about visibility and being recognized as untouchable before anyone dared to test it. I feel heavy. Her fingers rose to the stones almost involuntarily and brushed their cold, unyielding surfaces. The chill seeped into her skin and down her spine, as if the necklace were drawing warmth from her rather than offering any in return. Heavy did not begin to cover it. The weight pressed into her chest and into her thoughts, pulling her deeper into a role she was still learning to breathe inside. Power, she realized, did not lift. It settled, demanding space within her.
That is the weight of power, my dear. Stand up straight. Tonight is the company gala. Ready to burn it down.
Magnus straightened her posture with a subtle pressure, aligning her spine as one might correct a painting on a wall. His tone softened just enough to sound indulgent, not kind. The company gala hovered between them like a battlefield dressed in crystal and champagne, a place where alliances shifted under chandeliers and smiles concealed knives. Burning it down did not mean chaos. It meant control so absolute that the aftermath would look inevitable. Light the match, Magnus. Her eyes narrowed, focus sharpening into something dangerous and deliberate. The hesitation from moments ago receded, replaced by resolve that surprised even her. If she was to carry this weight, she would decide how it was used. The emeralds lay cold against her skin, but beneath them something steadier began to form. In that instant, Clara did not look like an accessory to Magnus's power. She looked like ignition, waiting for the smallest spark to justify the fire. The gala unfolded like a living painting beneath crystal chandeliers, their light refracting across marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Classical music swelled through the vast hall as violins wove elegance into every breath, while hundreds of guests murmured, laughed, and clinked glasses in carefully curated harmony. The air smelled faintly of champagne and expensive perfume, and every movement felt rehearsed, as if the night itself existed to impress an unseen judge. Near one of the towering columns, Leo stood relaxed and careless, laughter spilling easily as he leaned toward Jessica. His posture was loose and privileged, untouched by consequence. Around them, other guests glanced over with practiced smiles, acknowledging his status while pretending not to stare. For Leo, this gala was nothing more than another stage where he naturally belonged.
Yeah, my dad is coming. He is probably bringing some boring donor. Wait, who is that?
The music did not fade gently. It stopped as if a blade had cut through the melody, leaving a sudden, unnatural silence. Conversations died mid-sentence, and glasses froze inches from lips. An invisible pressure settled over the room as every instinct turned toward the same focal point. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, striking marble with absolute confidence, each step echoing like a countdown. From the grand staircase descended Magnus Sterling. His presence bent the atmosphere, tall and broad-shouldered, encased in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look less like a man attending a gala and more like a conqueror surveying his domain. His expression was carved from stone, his gaze sharp enough to command obedience without a word. Yet the crowd was not looking at him. Every eye slid past Magnus, drawn to the woman on his arm. She moved with controlled elegance, draped in liquid gold that caught the chandelier light with every step. Around her neck rested the sterling emeralds, unmistakable and legendary, heavy with power and history. Her beauty was cold and distant, the kind that silenced rooms and rewrote hierarchies.
Clara?
The word barely escaped Leo's mouth before his hand betrayed him. His fingers loosened and the crystal glass slipped free, shattering against the floor in a sharp crash. The sound rang louder than the silence that followed as color drained from his face. "Who is that? Why is she wearing that necklace?" Whispers rippled outward like shockwaves as guests leaned toward one another with wide eyes and speculation. The sterling emeralds were not jewelry loaned lightly. They were a declaration. Cameras began to lift, fingers hovering, sensing history in the making.
Good evening, Leo. I believe you know my fiancé.
Magnus approached without haste, and the crowd parted before him as if obeying an unspoken command. Gasps erupted as his words landed, and camera flashes burst, filling the air with light and disbelief as the moment was instantly immortalized.
Fiancé? Dad, she is my ex. I dumped her 3 days ago. She is a secretary.
Heat rushed to Leo's face as anger and panic tangled together. The words spilled out too fast and too loud, stripped of strategy. Around him, guests stiffened, sensing the danger of witnessing a Sterling family fracture in public.
Watch your tone. She is the future Mrs. Sterling. She is a board member, and she is your superior. Show some respect.
Magnus's voice dropped into menace, a low vibration that straightened spines. Each sentence fell like a verdict, stripping Leo of ground to stand on as power shifted palpably through the room. "Hello, Leo. Jessica, lovely dress. It is from last season, is it not? Darling, I am thirsty. Get me a drink." Clara smiled with sweet precision, a courtesy sharpened into a weapon. Her eyes passed over Leo with calm detachment before settling briefly on Jessica. When she turned to Magnus, her tone softened, intimate, as if the room no longer existed.
Of course, my love.
Without hesitation, Magnus inclined his head and moved to obey. The gesture was small yet seismic to those watching, a man who commanded empires now fetching a drink at her request. Inside Leo's mind, something fractured. Shock screamed louder than any gasp as his thoughts spiraled through memories of dismissal and control. The woman he believed insignificant now stood untouchable at the pinnacle of his world, and the realization hollowed his chest with disbelief, rage, and dawning terror. The boardroom was sealed tight with glass and steel, a ceremonial arena where power was measured in eye contact and silence. Papers whispered across the polished table as hands adjusted reports that suddenly felt heavier than paper should. The air itself seemed tense, compressed by unspoken blame and anticipation, every breath drawn carefully as if the room might shatter under the wrong word.
The Asian deal is dead. The suppliers walked.
Magnus occupied the head of the table like a monarch on a modern throne. He did not rush to respond. A pen rotated lazily between his fingers, its smooth, clicking rhythm cutting through Leo's outburst. The gesture was deliberate and controlled, signaling that panic had no authority here.
Disappointing, Leo. Clara, what do you think?
Clara did not look startled when her name was called. She reached for a folder with calm precision and flipped it open as though this moment had been scheduled long in advance. Her posture was composed, shoulders relaxed, eyes clear. I already called the suppliers. I spoke to them in Mandarin. They did not walk because of the price. They walked because Leo insulted their CEO's daughter. I apologized. The deal is back on with a 5% discount. The board members leaned toward one another, a low wave of sound rippling across the table. Approval showed in nods, exchanged glances, and half smiles that carried both relief and admiration. Brilliant. She saved us. Magnus's gaze settled on Clara with an intensity that stripped away pretense. Pride sharpened his features, and beneath it lay recognition and desire for dominance, mirrored by competence. He straightened, and the room instinctively quieted.
Well done. Leo, get out. You are removed from the project. Clara's in charge now.
Leo's chair scraped against the floor as he surged to his feet. Control slipped from him, replaced by raw outrage and wounded disbelief.
This is insane. She is manipulating you.
The door slammed with explosive finality, echoing through the boardroom. What followed was a heavy, suffocating silence. Magnus rose and circled the table, stopping behind Clara and turning her chair until she faced him.
That was incredibly hot. Watching you destroy him with a spreadsheet.
Clara met his gaze without flinching. The room felt charged with a different kind of tension, personal and electric. Her confidence did not waver. I told you I was good. Magnus leaned closer, his presence eclipsing the overhead lights as authority transformed into something intimate. Chairs shifted as executives gathered their things and moved to leave.
Class dismissed. Everyone out. Stay. We need to discuss your bonus.
The door did not merely close. It sealed the room with decisive finality. Internal locks slid into place with muted mechanical certainty, as if the building itself had chosen silence. Automated blinds descended in smooth synchronization until the outside world was reduced to thin seams of gray light. The office transformed into a private chamber, insulated from time, sound, and interruption. Even the air seemed to still, holding its breath. Magnus stood near the desk with squared shoulders, the city's authority clinging to him like a tailored second skin. He loosened his tie with practiced ease, the fabric sliding free as a subtle signal that something rigid was being undone. His movements were unhurried and deliberate, radiating control rather than haste, as though the room now moved according to his tempo. Magnus, we are at work.
I own the building. I make the rules. Come here.
The command filled the space between them. Clara hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for the weight of the moment to settle in her chest, and then she moved. Each step toward him felt amplified. Magnus reached for her without rush and lifted her onto the massive oak desk, its polished surface cool and unyielding beneath her.
You were trembling earlier when Leo raised his voice.
Habit. He used to yell a lot. Magnus cupped her face, his palm warm and steady, his thumb resting along her cheekbone with firm but gentle pressure. The gesture anchored her attention on him. His proximity altered her sense of scale until the office and the building receded, leaving only breath, warmth, and the steady rhythm of his control.
He is a boy. Boys yell because they are weak. Men do not need to yell. Does this scare you? The age, the power?
His lips brushed her neck with unhurried intention, his voice resonating against her skin rather than the air. The contrast between his calm tone and the intensity of the gesture created a disorienting intimacy. The unspoken promise beneath the question suggested that fear and safety were two sides of the same controlled coin. No, it makes me feel safe, like nothing can touch me. Her words lingered between them, fragile yet resolute. In admitting that sense of safety, she surrendered a vigilance she rarely allowed herself. Within the soft shadows of the office, her past felt distant, as if the very structure of the room stood guard and kept everything before from reaching her.
Nothing will ever touch you again unless I allow it. You are the queen, Clara, and the king serves the queen.
His voice vibrated low and unwavering, each word settling with deliberate gravity. The titles were declarative rather than playful, reshaping power into something ceremonial and absolute. As he kissed her deeply, papers slid from the desk and scattered to the floor, and the room bore silent witness to a moment that rewrote its purpose. The sharp trill of Clara's phone sliced through the quiet room like a blade. It was not loud, but it was insistent, vibrating against the glass tabletop and sending faint ripples through the stillness of the air. Clara froze for half a second before her fingers closed around the device, her pulse already accelerating as the name on the screen confirmed what her gut had sensed. The room seemed to shrink as she lifted the phone, walls pressing inward, oxygen thinning with every breath she drew.
Clara, listen, I know you are faking it. I have photos from when we were together, private photos. If you do not break up with my dad and leave the company, I leak them tomorrow morning.
Leo's voice poured through the speaker with a cold, deliberate calm, each sentence spaced just enough to let the threat fully settle. As he spoke, memories Clara had tried to bury clawed their way back to the surface, moments of trust twisted now into weapons. Her hand trembled, knuckles whitening as she gripped the phone harder, as if pressure alone could crush the words before they reached her ears. Leo, you would not. That is illegal. Panic surged through her chest, a wild and disorienting rush that left her breath shallow and uneven. Her mind raced through laws, consequences, and desperate hopes that he was bluffing, that some shred of morality might still restrain him. The room blurred at the edges as fear sharpened every sound. The hum of electricity, the distant city noise, the blood roaring in her ears.
Try me, I have nothing to lose. Meet me at the old apartment in an hour, or the internet sees everything.
The final words landed with brutal finality. Before Clara could respond, the call ended, the line going dead with a hollow click that echoed far louder than it should have. She stared at the dark screen, chest heaving, lungs dragging in air that refused to feel sufficient. Tears spilled freely now, hot and unstoppable, as her body betrayed the strength she tried to hold on to. Her thumb slipped, ending the call entirely as if that might erase what had just happened. She folded inward, shoulders shaking, breath coming in short, broken gasps. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the quiet sound of her crying as she struggled to stay upright.
Who was that?
Magnus's voice came from the doorway, low and controlled, cutting through her, unraveling like a blade through fabric. He stood there, a solid presence framed by the light behind him, his posture alert, his instincts already awakened. One look at Clara's state told him this was no trivial interruption. No one. Just spam. The lie tasted bitter the moment it left her mouth. Magnus crossed the room in long, measured strides, the floor barely creaking beneath his weight. Without asking, he took the phone from her hand, his touch firm but not unkind, grounding even as it stripped away her last fragile shield.
Rule number 1 of being a Sterling, Clara. We do not lie to each other. Tell me.
His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unyielding, searching not just for words, but for truth. The room seemed to hold its breath with them, waiting. Clara's composure finally shattered completely, her resistance dissolving under the weight of his gaze and the safety it promised. It is Leo. He has photos, nude photos. He is going to leak them if I do not leave you. Magnus, I have to go. I cannot let him ruin your reputation. Her confession came out between sobs, each sentence a fracture breaking her further open. Shame, fear, and love tangled painfully in her chest as she spoke, convinced that sacrifice was the only way left to protect the man she loved. Magnus did not respond immediately. His face went utterly still, as if carved from stone, all warmth retreating behind something far colder.
Your reputation? I do not care about my reputation. I care about him threatening my wife.
The shift was unmistakable. Whatever gentleness had been there vanished, replaced by something dangerous and precise. Magnus reached into his jacket and pulled out his secure phone. Movements economical and decisive. Power radiated from him now, not loud, not theatrical, but absolute.
Security, prepare the car and bring the extraction team. We are going hunting.
As he lowered the phone, the future rearranged itself in that single moment. The fear that had dominated the room was replaced by a different force entirely, inevitable and relentless. Whatever waited at the old apartment was no longer a threat made in the shadows. It was prey. The apartment sat high above the city, its windows rattling under the relentless assault of rain and thunder. Water streaked down the glass like nervous veins, blurring the skyline into a trembling smear of light and shadow. Each thunderclap rolled through the space with brutal intimacy, vibrating the walls, the floor, even the air in Leo's lungs. The room smelled faintly of cold concrete and expensive cologne, a curated luxury now suffocating under the storm's pressure, as if the night itself had come to pass judgment. Leo stood at the center of it all, unhurried, almost pleased with himself. His posture carried the lazy confidence of someone who believed he still controlled the game. He checked his phone once more, thumb hovering possessively over the screen, a smirk tugging at his mouth. In his mind, this was theater, power carefully staged, leverage sharpened to a blade. Outside, lightning split the sky, but inside, Leo believed himself untouchable.
Glad you came, Clara. Ready to beg?
The answer came not in words, but in violence. The door was annihilated as hinges screamed and the solid frame was kicked inward, wood splintering apart in a deafening crash that swallowed the thunder itself. Cold air rushed in, carrying rain mist and the metallic scent of weapons. Heavy boots thundered across the floor as armed guards poured into the apartment with precise, rehearsed movements. The smug little stage Leo had built collapsed in an instant. They fanned out with surgical efficiency, guns raised, eyes empty. Then, as if the room itself recognized authority, a silence fell. Magnus entered last, carrying a black umbrella pristine and dry despite the storm, as though reality itself had bent to accommodate him. His presence was not loud or rushed, but it was absolute, and terror followed close behind.
Dad, what are you doing?
Magnus paused just inside the ruined doorway. With deliberate care, he closed the umbrella, the soft click unnervingly gentle against the chaos he had unleashed. He set it aside as one might remove a glove, his expression unreadable as his eyes fixed on Leo with the cold assessment of a man reviewing a failed investment.
I am cleaning up my mess, and you, Leo, are my biggest mess. Give me the phone.
The words landed heavier than any blow. Leo's confidence shattered, replaced by raw panic that crawled across his face. His hand tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening, as if the small device were a life raft in a suddenly endless ocean.
No, it's my leverage.
Magnus did not raise his voice or argue. He merely tilted his head and lifted 2 fingers in a subtle, dismissive gesture. The order traveled instantly and efficiently from his will to the guards.
Break his hand.
Pain arrived with a sound that was wet, final, and irreversible. Bone crunched beneath force, and Leo's scream tore through the apartment, raw and animal. He collapsed, clutching his ruined hand as the phone slipped free. The storm outside seemed almost merciful by comparison. Magnus stepped forward, retrieved the phone, and began to scroll, utterly unmoved by his son's agony.
She was beautiful, and she trusted you, and you betrayed that trust.
Disgust hardened his features as he stared at the images, as though each one confirmed something he had long suspected. Without ceremony, he let the phone fall and crushed it beneath his heel. The crunch echoed like a verdict.
It's gone. The cloud backup is wiped. My tech team handled it 5 minutes ago.
Hope drained from Leo's face as thoroughly as blood from an open wound. He sobbed on the floor, reduced to a broken figure as rainwater from the shattered doorway mixed with his tears.
Dad, please, I'm your son.
Magnus looked down at him, not with anger, but with revulsion. The distance between them felt immeasurable, more than blood, more than years, more than forgiveness could ever bridge.
No, you are a biological accident. You are cut off. No money, no trust fund, no job. You have 24 hours to leave the country. If I see you again...
He turned his head and finally acknowledged Clara's presence. His gaze shifted, calculating, offering her the weight of a decision that could end a life without another word.
I will let her decide what happens to you.
Morning arrived gently at the beach house, as if the sun itself understood the need for quiet after everything that had happened. Pale light spilled across the wooden balcony, warming salt-bleached railings and the wide glass doors behind them. Below, the ocean breathed in long, steady rhythms, waves rolling in and collapsing with a soft, persistent thunder. The air smelled of salt and distant seaweed, clean and honest. It was the kind of morning that did not demand anything, only offered space to think, to feel, to finally rest. Magnus and Clara sat side by side on the balcony, their chairs angled slightly toward one another without conscious effort. They were close enough that their arms almost touched, close enough to feel each other's warmth against the cool coastal breeze. Neither of them rushed to speak. Silence here was not awkward. It was earned. It wrapped around them like a blanket, stitched together by everything they had survived. Is he gone? Clara's voice broke the stillness softly, as if she were afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace of the morning. Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a blurred line. The question carried more than its few words suggested, holding relief, uncertainty, and the lingering echo of conflict that had not yet fully faded from her body.
He is in Iceland, working on a fishing boat. It will build character. Are you okay?
Magnus answered without hesitation, his tone calm and almost dry, but beneath it lay a deliberate finality. The past had been put in motion, sent far away across cold waters. When he asked if she was okay, he finally turned to her, studying her face with the careful attention of someone who had learned how much could hide behind a single expression. I felt powerful, watching you defend me. But Magnus, people say I'm a gold digger, that I married you for revenge. As Clara spoke, her fingers curled together in her lap, knuckles whitening briefly before relaxing again. Power was not a feeling she was accustomed to naming aloud, especially not power that came from being seen and protected. The old accusations still clung to her, sharp and invasive, replaying in her mind with cruel persistence. Saying them out loud felt painful, but necessary.
Did you?
The question was simple, and almost deceptively so. Magnus did not accuse or defend, he only asked. His voice carried no judgment, only curiosity, and a quiet confidence that whatever answer came, they would face it together. The ocean filled the pause that followed, waves surging and retreating, as if giving her time. Maybe at first, but now, Clara finally turned toward him. The admission was honest and stripped of excuses. She leaned closer, closing the small distance between them, and reached for his hand. Her fingers wrapped around his, slow and deliberate, as if memorizing the shape of him all over again. She lifted his hand and pressed her lips to his knuckles, a tender kiss filled with gratitude, remorse, and devotion. "Now I can't imagine a world without you. You taught me how to be strong." The words seemed to settle into the space between them, heavy with truth. Strength, she had learned, was not domination or armor. It was choice, trust, and the courage to stay. Her grip tightened slightly, as if afraid that naming it might make it disappear.
And you taught me how to feel.
Magnus smiled, not the polished smile the world knew, but something softer and almost shy. He reached into his jacket, movements unhurried, and withdrew a small ring box. The gesture was unceremonious and deeply intimate, framed by nothing but sea air and morning light. He opened the box, the ring catching the sun in a brief, brilliant flash.
We had the engagement, but we never had the wedding. Let's do it properly. No press, no Leo. Just us.
There was no grand speech and no spectacle, only intention. The proposal was not about proving anything to the world. It was about reclaiming something for themselves, something sacred and unobserved. The ocean seemed to hush, as if listening. Yes, the word came easily, without doubt. Clara laughed softly through the emotion rising in her chest, tears blurring her vision. In that single syllable lived forgiveness, acceptance, and a future finally chosen freely.
Come here, Mrs. Sterling. The king needs his queen.
Magnus pulled her into his arms, and Clara went willingly, folding into him as though that was where she had always belonged. Their kiss was deep and unguarded, carrying history and promise in equal measure. Below them, the ocean swelled, waves crashing louder now, as if applauding the quiet coronation. The world faded gently to white noise and salt air, leaving only the two of them and the certainty that this was, at last, enough.